Hello, you're watching Hornbill TV's newsroom. The burning issue in Nagaland almost every month has been the strict implementation of the inner line permit over the districts of Nagaland to ensure that no illegal immigrants enter the state. In this regard, the state government recently took a decision to implement the ILP in the newly created districts of Chumukidma and Newland and Nagaland's commercial hub Dimapur, which was a major bone of contention. The implementation of the ILP, which has its own criteria, has now been enlisted. Along with this development, another seems to be gaining traction since it was introduced in the year 2019, the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland, or RIIN. The government first broached the issue of RIIN in its notification on 29 June 2019. The stated purpose was to make a master list of all the indigenous inhabitants of Nagaland. After intense deliberations and consultations with civil societies and stakeholders, a three-member commission known as the Bano Commission was formed to examine, recommend, and advise on all issues relating to RIIN, including how the exercise is to be carried out. Just recently, Minister of Higher Education and Tourism Temja Nimnalong has said that the government was committed to implement the RIIN as soon as the modalities were completed, whereas Parliamentary Affairs Minister KG Kenye had also earlier said that the government was committed to implement RIIN. In today's newsroom, the topic, the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland, will be in focus, and to speak about it, we have our associate editor Almuli, who will be joining us in this morning's newsroom to discuss more on the importance and whether the implementation of RIIN will actually have its effect on the ground level. Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for joining me on this newsroom. Before we get into the actual topic of the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland, sir, so, is there any distinction that is to be made out between the inner line permit and the RIIN, or rather the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland, and what are some of the differences between these two documents, and do these two documents really complement each other in trying to figure out who an actual inhabitant of the state is?
Yes, Akivi. While it is true that both the documents seem to be concerned about people who are not really citizens of the state of Nagaland, they are not to supplement the other. So the ILP will not supplement the RIIN, yes, and vice versa. They just complement each other. But it is true that the ILP will also help greatly once, if at all, the government of Nagaland decides to go ahead with a registry here. So it will be, the ILP will be one of the biggest complementing tools, if I may call it, to the registry. But the registry on itself will not be working in cohesion with the ILP, because the registry on its own will just be a document that will say whether you are a part of the state or not. But the ILP, on the other hand, will be just to prevent people who are not part of the Nagaland community from entering the state or staying too long. It is practically only for outsiders. So they will not be supplanting the other, but they will be complementing the other. Even more so, once the registry is implemented, the ILP will be one of its biggest appendages in this regard, Akivi.
All right, sir. Now, coming back to the actual topic in hand, so we have heard a lot of our elected leaders speaking in the Nagaland State Assembly, stating that if we do not control the illegal immigrant problem, we will have a situation that Assam is currently facing, or rather a clear example of what Tripura is facing, where the indigenous inhabitants are now minorities in their own state, or rather in their own land, through which they are being left out from availing any governmental benefits, or rather people who have illegally entered, or rather are now so-called legal immigrants or inhabitants of the state, are actually taking in more of the benefits than actually more deserving than the indigenous people. We've got vocal leaders like MLA Chumbemokikon from the Lotha community. We've got MLA Azo from the Chakasang community that have really been very vociferous when it comes to the issue of illegal immigrants. Do you believe that this exercise of the Registry of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland comes at a right time, or do you feel that if even the ILP, or rather the ILP exercise, could not be implemented with so much strictness and with so much better, do you think that the RIIN could achieve the actual goal of actually saving the Naga race and also determining who the actual indigenous inhabitants of Nagaland are, sir?
The registry is just a document of citizenship.
Yes.
It is not to decide who comes in and comes out of the state, AKV.
Yes.
The ILP has been there since the 1980s.
Yes.
There has been no change, because the registry will say whether you are a permanent resident of the state of Nagaland, but it does not. It will not provide for any bulwarks or any mechanism that will say if people will come in and go outside of the state. So it has been there for a long time, the ILP, but still we have been seeing a lot of people come in and go out. We still have the problem of illegal immigrants.
Yes.
And I think most of them are from the state of Assam, and of course they also come from towards Tripura, from West Bengal, and from there Bangladesh. So the route is open. So it is not a transit document, the registry. It will simply say whether you are part of the state or not. So I think most people confuse the ILP with the registry.
Yes.
But they are not one and the same, their functions are different.
Yes.
So even if we don't have the registry in the first place, I think what the government is trying to do is that it is trying to divert its attention from its failure. Yes. That it failed to prevent illegal immigrants from coming into the state.
Yes.
So the fact that you are a citizen of India will not change because the document says so.
Yes.
It will change only if you keep the borders open. So these are two different things, and I think it is also behoove on the state of Nagaland, the government authorities, to educate the people in this regard. They think that if you have the certificate here, you wouldn't be able to come in and out of the state. These are two different tools. So while if we have the registry to a level, it can also help in corroborating whether a person that is coming into the state is legal.
Yes.
We can corroborate using the registry, but you cannot corroborate your ILP using the registry. So there is a lot of complex interplay of different elements of administration here, of citizenship rights here, in your claim to whether you should be in the state or not. So there's a lot of complex component. I saw the Banu Jamir committee report, and it's huge. I think it's like about 100 kilograms, this much. The recommendations were about like maybe 2 or 3 pages. So it is a very complex document, and it is not something that we should just pass it off as a one-off government administrative report. It has to it demands a lot of consultation, especially with the communities who are involved in this regard. And also, I think because people confuse the ILP with the registry here, yes. I think we need to make it clear that whether we have a registry or not, whether we have a RIIN or not, the ILP will always be needed, because there should be some kind of a bulwark at the borders to make sure that we don't allow in people illegally. Or even if they come in, there should be mechanisms where we ensure that they leave. Because like I said, one is a document of citizenship, and the other is a document of travel. Yes. It's simply a transit permit.
All right, so now coming back to the documents required to ascertain certain certificates, or rather the ILP and the RIIN. In the ILP, so you've got to, you are required to show your Aadhaar card, you are required to show the place you are coming from, you are required to have a guarantor who is guaranteed that yes, under our guidance, this person has come from this certain state. Well, on the other hand, for the RIIN, one of the most important documents that one should have is the PRC, or the Permanent Residence Certificate, that is issued by the various village councils. Well, in this regard, sir, there have been voices being raised where we've got the Chief Minister, Nifurio, when he was speaking on the topic of the RIIN, he had said that the village councils would play a very important role in issuing the PRC and also giving a history of that particular person's lineage, or at least to have a certain proof that that person existed, or rather was living in the state of Nagaland before 1963. Well, that was one of the cutoff dates in which various tribal head, or rather tribal organizations such as the Ausenden have demanded that when it comes to the matter of RIIN, the cutoff date should be December 1, 1963, or rather the year we got statehood. But then we've got another community which states that the Banu Commission should look on the basis of the electoral roll of the December 1 and should not have so much dependence on the VC. So when you look at both sides, don't you think that both the village councils and the documentation of rather having your name on the electoral list before December 1, 1963 could play with each other and could complement each other to give us a better outlook as to who the indigenous inhabitants are? And where do you think the issue comes out, sir, in this regard?
Yeah, I think technically speaking, for the Naga community members,
yes,
it will be much easier for them. The Banu Jamir committee report says that every Naga person has a village.
Yes.
There is no Naga person anywhere in the world who did not come from a village of some sort. So their ancestry is, in that say, absolute.
Yes.
So like you say, the village council here will be the heart of the registry of indigenous inhabitants of Nagaland here at Keve.
Yes.
They are going to be the heart of it. It's not going to be the deputy commissioner. It's not going to be the government. So now to your question of voters card. So if we look at some of the people, and when we are talking of people who were in Nagaland prior to 1940, we are talking about only a single community, the Gorkha people,
yes,
the Nepali, who were here prior to 1940. So now, because when we talk of voters card, I doubt that all of them will have it, even their descendants. Even now, I know a lot of Naga people who are in their 30s and 40s who don't have voters card. Because there was a guarantee, there was an assurance that because they were a citizen of the state of Nagaland, you could have your documentation anytime because you traced your ancestry to a village.
yes,
So it's technically easier for you, but for people like the Gorkha people, it's going to be a little difficult, and maybe even for the Kachari,
yes,
for the Garbi, the Garo, and the Kuki.
yes,
So these communities will have to go through a difficult time to find their ancestry prior to 1963 in Nagaland, or for the Gorkha people 1940. So most of them, they wouldn't be able to, you may have your voters card, right?
yes,
But if you are going to trace your ancestry to your grandfather and you have to prove that your grandmother and your grandfather was here in Nagaland prior to 1940, where are you going to get the documentation of electoral rolls
yes,
to prove, hey, that's my grandfather? So that is the reason why the Banu Jamir committee report says, instead of that, but of course it's not supplanting the voter's ID.
yes,
But in case it is not there, it suggests, then we are going to look at your land deed. So now there is also a problem. What if your grandfather did not buy land in Nagaland prior to 1940 and you don't have land deed? How are you going to find the proof that your grandfather was here way back in 1963 or 1940? So The committee has said that they are going to use the land deed, and if they have documents saying that this is their grandfather or grandmother who were here prior to 1940, then good for them. But in case they don't have, they are going to go back to the land deed, and in which village or which community, which area the land deed was given. So it is not clear-cut, okay? There are a lot of, like I said, complex interplay of both administrative functions, documents, and your need to have verification that can come only from the village authorities, if you can find any. So it will not be only one document. Yes. It will not only be one verification. It will be many. So I think the committee reports it tries to be a little more flexible, because even my grandfather, when they started Akuluto town, like many years ago, I don't think he was literate also. So for instance, so you'll have to search for documents. If you don't have documents, like, then how are you going to prove it? So if it is going to be a little difficult for some of the Naga people, although technically it might be easier for them compared to the other 5, I think it will be harder for the 5 communities that I pointed out, including the pre-1940 Gorkha, to be able to prove their residency here from 1963 or 1940 actually.
All right, so in this particular regard, since you have already broached the topic, so it was in the month, last month itself, on September 30th, that the Association of Indigenous Minority Tribes of Nagaland, which constitute the Kukis, the Kacharis, Garos and the Mikirs, had pointed out on a certain notification that the government had taken out with regards to RIIN, in which these 4 tribes have been singled out when it comes to the verification of RIIN, and these 4 tribes will be the first to actually undergo this RIIN, in which they have displayed, or rather they have mentioned their disconcern and dismay over the fact as to why these 4 groups have been singled out, and whether the government will follow the Bano committee's recommendations, and why are they going away from the recommendations of the committee, and why are they singling them out, and also whether all the other Naga tribes, or rather the 18 recognized tribes in Nagaland, will also have to undergo the same process as them. Well, in their regard, they have also spoken up about their ancestry and the history, and those were some of the things that you had just mentioned. So do you believe that if, with these 4 tribes that have been existent in Nagaland ever since, or rather since statehood, I mean, if you look at Dimapur, it was the Kacharis. We have seen their population literally go down. There was recently, even in the ULB polls, there was a conflict over nomination of a Kachari candidate into the ULB polls, where all tribal bodies insisted that only indigenous inhabitants of Nagaland could fight this ULB poll. So after looking at all this, do you believe that if this were to be exercised, this legal action could have a recourse in the courts, because then you are going against Article 14 of the Constitution, which is now a fundamental right and which can now directly be challenged in the Supreme Court, because you are now being discriminated on the basis of caste, creed, sex and identity. So do you believe that with such exercise there are more legal complications that the government of Nagaland will have to face later?
Yeah, definitely, Akivi. I called up the Chief Minister's office the other day, and I inquired about what was happening. Like, now if you are going to implement the registry, then why is it that the government decided that the 5 communities that you mentioned, the Kachari Garo, the Kuki, and the Gorkhas,
and the Mikirs too,
and the Garbi, yes. So I wanted to know the reason why the chief ministers, why the government had decided that this should be the only ones to go in first. And I have not yet received any explanation in this regard, and I'm still in touch with them, and they say that they met earlier in this regard, about 2 or 3 days ago. But because there was no information about what they discussed specifically, I can't say anything for now, but I think, and I speculate, that the government wanted to start with the 5 communities first, because it was understood that they were the minority, the smaller of the lot in terms of populations.
Yes.
So you wanted to, if you want to start something, if you want to start a big project, you want to go with the more convenient ones first, and then you go to the bigger populations. So I think that's what the government decided. And again, the government decided that they should go ahead with these 5 communities first, because I think the way you are going to authenticate their ancestry,
Yes.
or their proof of residence, or their residency in the state of Nagaland from, let's say, 1940 or 1963, the documentation and the technical process involved to authenticate all this is different from the way you are going to authenticate the proper
Immediate rights.
communities of Nagaland.
Yes.
So there are two difficult and distinct authentication process going on. It is not going to be the same way you are going to look at the Garbi or the cookies as you would be as you would be using to authenticate the Aus or the Sumi or the Lothas. So these are two different technical processes that will go into the registry. So that is why I believe the government decided to go with the small communities first, the minority communities, and then later on start off with the indigenous, the proper Naga indigenous peoples in the state.
All right, so now in this regard, there are also concerns stating the effectiveness of the electoral rolls. If you look at history, before 1963, there was a clarion call of many Naga groups to not go and enroll yourselves, where you will find a lot of villages, if you look at the eastern part of it, which a lot of them were not under British control and did not even have an electoral roll. Well, what about those names? What about those people who are living there? How are they going to prove that they are already residents of that sector? On another point, sir, there have also, if there are people who are appreciating the government of Nagaland for the implementation of RIIN, there are also many groups that have come out against the RIIN, and many of these groups belong to the Naga national groups, where they have voiced out their concern over the implementation of RIIN in Nagaland, in which they have said that Nagas in a whole can go live in any Naga territory indigenous to themselves. But do you believe that this Naga identity of the Naga national group and the RIIN is completely, totally different? Because can't the Nagas of Nagaland just protect their individual rights over inhabitants, or rather their indigeneity, and also protect the land that they're living in at the moment, sir?
Yeah, I think we have had a lot of colorful characters in the Naga underground groups. You know, you have had Biharis, you have had Manipuris. I think way back during the early 1970s, I think one of the NSN groups had even a lieutenant who was from Bihar. So I think there are a lot of people who try to use the Naga cause as a way to cementing their presence here in the state permanently. And if there were some kind of a solution, I think those people are going to take advantage of it and say, okay, we are here and we have fought for the state, for the people of Nagaland, and I think you should be giving us your share. There must be a lot of people. And definitely, yes, as you said, these are two different things, but you don't know. We don't know how the system would be manipulated. They say the more refined the system, the more sophisticated the attackers. So right now, although there are two different distinct things, we don't know how people will try to manipulate the system just to get their way here. So that's the first thing. And second, if we are going to start implementing the registry, then I think we'll have to go back to the voters' roll. I had 3 names I did not know. I had a voter's name in the village. I had one in Dimapur. And then my cousin had my name and his photograph on the roll, and he did not know how that happened. So I think if we have to start implementing the registry, we have to go back to the voters' roll, cleanse it, cleanse everything and then start off with the program. Otherwise, there will be a lot of complexities and problems for the government of Nagaland in the future and for the people as well.
All right, sir. We seem to have run out of time, but we will definitely have another session on this particular topic, the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland, as it needs, I think there are much major complexities that we need to delve into.
A lot.
And hopefully the government too can clear all its complexities and can implement the RIIN as soon as possible. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your time this morning. Well, that was our associate editor, Alngoli, and we were just speaking on the contentious Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland, which the government of Nagaland has assured and is committed to implement it as soon as possible. We've also heard ministers stating that the modalities of which are currently being made, after which it will be implemented. Well, there are various complexities on it. Various CSOs and various organizations have come in favor of the RIIN, and various groups and also CSOs have come against the RIIN, the objectives that it has, and also about the other fact, talking about the Association of the Minority Naga Tribes in Nagaland. Well, they have supported the RIIN, but they are not totally happy with the way the government has singled out for minority groups, namely the Kukis, the Garos, the Kacharis, and the Mikirs. Well, this is a matter of huge concern for a lot of people, as this will now, the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland will now certify whether you are an actual inhabitant, indigenous inhabitant of Nagaland, whether you are a permanent resident of Nagaland, in which the government and the civil society has a huge role to play to implement it effectively. Well, Hornbill TV will be getting you more insights on this particular topic, the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland, and we will be delving more into this topic in the days to come. For more, keep watching Hornbill TV.